have quarterbacks. So what creates instability is not necessarily just a bad GM. If you don't get the quarterback right, it's amazing to watch the New York Giants this year, where we have looked at them for a decade as just a really unraveling mess. And suddenly they get the right coach. We still don't love the quarterback, but the coach elevates the quarterback, and kind of look around at the Giants today and you're like, oh, it's a playoff team. So much of this sport really comes down to, is the quarterback good? Derek Carr is. And does he have the right coach? I've thought about this before. You know, when you do free agency, you think about a lot of different things. And some athletes, most pro athletes, NFL, never have a no-trade clause. They just go where they go, which would just be an awful thing to have to move to a bad organization. So if I was Derek Carr, I would look at it, and increasingly, the bad organizations, to me, the owner meddles. Indianapolis has gone from very stable to chaotic. Washington, they meddle. Houston, they appear to be sort of lost at sea. They're just kind of bouncing around. There's the Raiders. I will say this: Josh McDaniels. I think I defended him this year. I would, if he lasts 4 years. You don't know if the Raiders don't become stable, because it does look like they have an offensive coach. They've got offensive weapons. Their division's very hard. So we'll see. It's easier said than done. Hey, I'm going to go find a stable organization. Then just look at the owner, Detroit. Now Detroit's pretty good. That's unstable. Chicago can't get offense right. Miami for years and years. They've been docked draft picks for things the owner's done. There's not a lot of great in the league at quarterback, at owner, at GM, at coach. There's about 6 great everything in the NFL, and most of those teams have their quarterback.
Let me ask you, the Tennessee Titans are a team that just made a curious decision. They've got a young quarterback. They're not going to play him. They're throwing Josh Dobbs into their biggest game of the season with Tannehill hurt. If you're Mike Vrabel and you look at this team and say, look at it, I had these guys in first place for almost the entire season. What if we add Derek Carr? Should they make a play for Derek Carr? Yeah,
I think what's really interesting is because you have to sort of look at your environment where you're at. If you are an AFC team, Tennessee, it's different. Burrow beat you last year at home. Allen, Mahomes, here comes Lamar Jackson. In your own division, Trevor Lawrence, Herbert. You've got 5 or 6 all-timers. They're all in your division. So I've said this. If I was Tennessee, maybe Green Bay would take a call on Aaron Rodgers. Of course they would. I would call Aaron Rodgers. You can't go into these games. They had a better defense than Cincinnati. They had home field advantage and a bye, and they couldn't beat Joe Burrow. So I think Tennessee, and also athletes love Nashville. It's a great city. It's easy to get free agents there. If you have the right quarterback who can get on the phone with a wide receiver or a tight end or a running back and say, hey, man, come down to Nashville. It's a good time.
And remember, they just jettisoned their GM who did not want to pay A.J. Brown. So there's going to be a different outlook on free agents moving forward in Tennessee. The other team that jumps out, Colin, Carolina Panthers. I'm pointing out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will not be a good team next year. Brady will not be there, we know. That division is very winnable. If you're Derek Carr, you go from the loaded AFC. Well, geez, the NFC. I could make the playoffs in Carolina. They were down to Week 16 with Sam Darnold, a third stringer.
Yeah, it's interesting. The other one that's out there today, and it's a real story, is that Jim Harbaugh will accept the Denver Broncos job, according to people like Bruce Feldman, if it is offered. So that, in my lifetime, I grew up with Craig Morton and John Elway. So Denver's always been a really, really, really good football operation. And I still think they are. They just took a big swing at quarterback, gave up a lot of draft capital, and it hasn't worked. They missed on the head coach. You do. I mean, listen, everybody gets a bad coach. Everybody's had a miss. It just happens. And so he will take the job if offered. And I'm not sure if this is public. I've kind of stayed off social media last 24 hours. I've been told it's $20 million. I've been told for Sean Payton, it would go to $25 million. So you start looking at those numbers, you have to consider it. Remember, Jim took a pay cut at Michigan. That's almost unprecedented. A star coach and a star program takes a pay cut.
I think it was a forced pay cut when he
Yes.
couldn't beat Ohio State, right? Then he bounces back and did not get a pay raise last year. He was not happy. So what did he do, Colin? He goes and interviews with the Minnesota Vikings. Remember that?
Yeah. So it should be noted, Jim was super successful in the NFL. I went and looked at his record this morning. I have it on a piece of paper here somewhere. I think it was 44-19-1. So Jim was a home run. Jim's never failed anywhere. It took him a little longer. He won 10 games first year at Michigan. But to play for the national championship or in the playoff took him longer. So that's a real story here, and it's a tipping point. The Walton family, that's old money. If they're going to pay $20 to $25 million for a coach, that's going to reset the market. And so I thought this morning, if I was Sean Payton, I'd let somebody else have the Denver job, let the market get reset, Carolina, and maybe.
Well, the problem with Carolina is you don't have a quarterback.
That's why you go get one.
Yeah.
So I've said this. Sports go through analytical changes. So, for instance, baseball, you used to not want to strike out. Now you don't want to ground ball. And so the game is now almost dually home run, strikeouts, that's it. It makes the game more boring. Basketball, the analytics, it got very mathy. You got to shoot threes. So it's eliminated the classic back to the basket center. Right in the middle of Dwight Howard's career, he was useless. He couldn't hit a three, couldn't hit a jumper. And you start looking at all the analytics in sports. Football has become, because of safety, very offensive. And if you start looking at the AFC now, best quarterback leads every division. And often it's the best quarterback with an offensive coach. Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor, Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, Mahomes, Andy Reid. Of course, every single coach in the AFC, 3 out of 4 coaches in the AFC East are defensive coaches. But you look at the NFC, I think it was last year, 7 of 7 teams that made the playoffs last year in the NFC, I think it was last year, were all offensive coaches. All of them. So that's where we're at in this sport. I don't know about the analytics of football. I think more coaches go for it on fourth down. But what has happened that is clear is that for safety reasons and television and commerce reasons, they have leaned heavy offense. If you don't have a quarterback, you have no shot. So Peter King talked about this earlier. The Denver situation comes down to this. How do you fix Russell Wilson? That's a bad job if you can't fix Russell Wilson. It's a bad job.
It's also an oil and water mix with Harbaugh and Wilson, right? Harbaugh can be gruff. You've talked at length about the interview you guys did. We know he's rubbed teams the wrong way after like 3 or 4 years and takes off. Russell Wilson's the antithesis of that, Colin. He is, Mr. Buttoned Up and super nice guy. I wonder how those two would work in Denver. It would be a fascinating experiment.
Yeah.
We saw he did not mesh well with McDaniels, Derek Carr. And when you get those two opposite personalities, sometimes it can go kind of awry.
Yeah. Coaches make more money. They have more power. They have a system. They have a formula. And if you don't buy into it, Belichick and Brady. And Tom was very amenable to lower money. Brady was worn out by Belichick. So you see Mac Jones and Belichick. So,
I think we would agree, though. You spend $4.6 billion on a team, Colin. Spending $20 million on a coach is nothing.
Well, for them, yeah.
Yeah, when you spend that much on a team.
Yeah, no, that argument.
This is a big investment. You need to enhance your investment. You got to spend money.
Yeah. All right. Mark Schlereth will join us next hour. Speaking of that Denver situation in Harbaugh, we'll keep you updated throughout the day. On Damar Hamlin, hour 3's coming up. Perspective on what it's like to go through this. Their football, as much as we love it, there are those occasional frightening moments. And we are continuing to monitor the health of Damar Hamlin. Collapsed on the field last night. And as frightening for all of us as that was, it does remind us how fortunate we are to have the first responders who reacted so quickly that hopefully saved his life. Often, I've probably been guilty of this, we complain about roughing the passer, the targeting rules, and the quick ejections in college football. And the reason the league implements those is because of last night. About, I think 6 months ago, Roger Goodell wasn't quoted, but somebody wrote a wonderful article about sort of the depth and the concerns of the safety of this sport. And that the greatest fear, whether it's the commissioner of NASCAR or a promoter in boxing or Roger Goodell, last night is everybody's greatest fear. Football is much safer than even 10, 15 years ago.